we've got a few last-minute stragglers, but I think we've got a pretty decent-sized contingent on the end there. It's going to feel very weird because everyone is muted, so I will feel a bit like I'm talking to myself, but I'm sort of getting used to this now. But I am just going to start off straight away, basically by saying good afternoon to everyone, first of all. Thanks for joining us today. There might be some non-UK people on the call as well, so good morning to anyone who's in the US on the West Coast or the East Coast. So thanks for joining. For those of you who don't already know me, my name is Jules Kendrick. I'm the former Chief Exec of JICWEBS, and as of the 1st of September, the current MD, UK and Europe, the Trustworthy Accountability Group, or TAG. You'll also see in one of those little squares on the call today, Adrian Lacey, who hopefully a lot of you already know, former Director of Standards for JICWEBS, and now TAG's Director of Policy and Programs, who is also the head of the Pilot Evaluation Committee. I'll be handing over to Adrian later on, but first I'm going to give you a bit of an overview on the journey that has brought us here today. Before I start, I just want to double check, Bonnie, are there some admin bits that we need to add in to give people an idea of how to use WebEx?
Sure, absolutely. Just very quickly, hi folks, this is Bonnie Niederstrasser here. We are muting all participants. We've got a great turnout today, which is good to see. If you, for some reason, have issues, need to ask a question throughout, there will be time at the very end for Q&A. However, do feel free to raise your hand via WebEx, or you may also use the chat or QA buttons that are located on your toolbar. I will be monitoring those boxes throughout, so thank you.
Great, thank you, Bonnie. So I'm going to talk a little bit about the TAG JICWEBS merger, but the main purpose of today, which hopefully you're all aware of, is to launch an industry consultation to discuss the launch of a distributed ledger technology industry consortium network. A bit of a mouthful, but it's a term that we're all going to get used to. So TAG's goal is to build on the work that JICWEBS has carried out over the last 18 months to further evaluate both the opportunities and challenges facing a DLT industry consortium network. So it's to look at what it can offer the digital ad industry and how it can address the issues and challenges that the industry has identified across the supply chain. So today we're going to be sharing detailed information about the initiative, so that will be both today and over the coming weeks, to help the industry as a whole fully understand and evaluate the proposed industry consortium network and give stakeholders across the supply chain the opportunity to give their input and determine the next phase for the initiative. Next slide, please, Bonnie. So before we get into the DLT, I think we should be really proud of the work that has been done by our industry to build trust and transparency, both by all of our industry bodies, so IPA, ISBAR, AOP, and the EFE, and its gold standard, of course, not to mention all the work done by IB Tech Lab, the ASA, Coalition for Better Ads, TCS, the Conscious Advertising Network, and of course the various technology and processes that individual companies across the supply chain implement. And then there's the work that both TAG and JICWEBS have been doing with the industry, building our well-respected brand safety and fraud standards. The merger of TAG and JICWEBS, which went live at on the 1st of this month. Oh no, not this month, because it is the 1st of October today. So it was actually the 1st of September, to remind myself that it's October now. But it makes it far easier for companies in the supply chain to adopt the high standards necessary to protect themselves and their customers across the globe. We already have over 110 companies signed up to the newly launched brand safety certification program, many of whom are on this call today, and over 30 of those companies are now applying the new BSC standard globally. So much like JICWEBS, TAG's remit is to address the trust and transparency challenges the industry is facing. And this includes assessing how new technologies can help the industry continue to self-regulate through standards, certifications, and best practices, and to ensure they're enforced at all times consistently and by all industry participants across the supply chain. So while DLT is still in its early-ish stages, TAG believes this pilot not only highlights the potential of this type of technology, but also the importance of working with stakeholders across the industry to evaluate and find consensus on common standards. As a result of this thinking and as part of the merger with JICWEBS, TAG agreed to continue the work on the Industry Consortium network. It's my cat trying to walk across the screen there. Next slide, please, Bonnie. So I think, we should be really proud, but despite the inroads we have made as an industry, I think we all know that there's still work to be done. The recent PwC study commissioned by ISBA and AOP certainly highlighted the complexity of the programmatic supply chain, as if we weren't already aware, and the need for industry consistency and data sharing and formatting. And I can't imagine that there isn't anyone on the call who isn't very aware of the growing pressure from government regulators to prove the compliance and accountability of digital advertising and to prove our ability to self-regulate as an industry. Next slide, please, Bonnie. So an industry consortium network using distributed ledger technology, DLT, is an always-on industry solution driving accountability and business efficiency. It's permissioned. In other words, you need to get permission from the governing entity to become a participant under the condition that you comply with the network principles at all times. So these principles can include minimum requirements related to industry standards, such as having tags, brand safety certification, or certified against fraud, or perhaps adherence to a specific regulation. A business has to prove that it's a legal entity with a network ID to actually be allowed onto the network. So the success of the network absolutely depends on adoption, and I can't really emphasize that enough. As a rule, the more companies are on the network, the more value it will drive to its participants in reducing business risk, increasing value, driving revenues, and reducing operating costs. I think it's useful here to point out that the TAG DLT and the cross-industry task force on the programmatic supply chain, which was formed as a result of the PwC study, are separate, complementary, and concurrent cross-industry initiatives. Both share the objective to drive trust, transparency, and efficiency across the supply chain. So the task force is focused on data and legal standards and their adoption across the programmatic supply chain. The TAG DLT could be the always-on technical solution supporting compliance, harmonization, reconciliation, and secure transmission of data between participants. The right legal framework for data access and data standards are going to be required for the successful implementation of an industry-owned and operated DLT network. The TAG DLT network could make it faster, more secure, and cost-effective for participants to comply with what is agreed by the task force. Next slide, please, Bonnie. So the initial discussions around DLT and what it could do for the digital ad industry started with the four trade bodies, ISBA, IAB, AOP, and IPA, just over a couple of years ago. And then over a 6-month period between October 2018 and March 2019, the four trade bodies and JICWEBS continued those discussions, carried out market analysis, and then in March 2019, the JICWEBS board gave the go-ahead for JICWEBS to run a DLT pilot using Fiducia as its technology partner. Participants across the supply chain recruited, brands, agencies, ad tech, and publishers. And in July 2019, the DLT pilot launched. The pilot ran for 9 months, and it was overseen by a pilot evaluation committee, which was made up of 20 experts in digital advertising and blockchain, and sometimes both. The committee basically produced a final report for the JICWEBS exec board, which evaluated the completed pilot results and put forward their recommendation. And that recommendation was to move the pilot into the next phase, which would be the most viable ecosystem. The JICWEBS exec board met in March 2020 to discuss what had been put forward by the board and agreed with the evaluation committee that the MVE phase, the most viable ecosystem phase, certainly held merit, but that an industry consultation was required prior to the launch of the MVE. And so here we are today, first day of October. I remember this time it was October, and we're ready to launch the TAG DLT industry consultation. So this is going to run for the next 5 weeks. Our goal, dependent on the outcome of the consultation and with the industry support, is to launch the next phase, the MVE phase, in H1 2021, with a view to a market launch of the TAG DLT network in H2 of 2021. Next slide, please, Bonnie. Gosh, sounds weird saying 2021. So really, I guess now, before I hand over to Adrian, I sort of take this opportunity to ask that everyone get involved. It's really important to make sure that you understand the benefits of the DLT network, what the opportunity is, the challenges it can address, and how it will affect the industry, how it will affect your business and the business of your clients. Your input is incredibly important. Your voice will help shape the network and ensure it addresses your needs. And finally, look into how your business could participate in the next phase of the initiative. Be part of shaping how we might operate as an industry in the future. So I'm going to hand over to Adrian now, who's going to share more details about the DLT Industry Consortium network and its benefits, share some top-level results from the pilot, and talk about next steps. So over to you, Adrian.
Remember to unmute. Thank you. Could we have the next slide, please, Bonnie? So yeah, thanks. Thanks, Jules. That was a great introduction. And just to reiterate who I am, I'm Adrian Lacey, Director of Standards and Policy at TAG. And I also ran the evaluation committee that oversaw the pilot. And I'll be chairing the steering committee to review the industry feedback to this really important industry consultation process. So just to kick off, I mean, when launching this project over a year ago at our JICWEBS town hall, I did hear two comments that stuck with me at the time. The first was that people were slightly punch drunk of hearing the term blockchain. It had been bandied around so much, it almost seemed like blockchain was a solution looking for a problem. And the second was more encouraging, but suggesting that where vendors work in silos and don't generally trust one another, introducing a form of blockchain or DLT builds consensus and enables connection in a way that doesn't challenge the existing infrastructure. So after seeing further evidence coming from ISBA's PwC study and more talk about regulatory pressure, there certainly needs to be some way to move our industry forward. And this cross-industry DLT project started at about the same time as the PwC ISBA study. But whereas they focused on the financial elements, we've always been focused on how logs from campaign data could be harmonized and securely shared with the right people across the supply path. Could I have the next slide, please, Bonnie? As you can see, all participants now have accessible log files from all campaigns, but the agency and publisher pictures are totally different based on their access. And even more importantly, it's very hard to see a true picture from buy through to sell side. Bonnie, can I have the next slide, please? So what I want you to imagine is that we're proposing the data equivalent of the energy national grid, allowing campaign data from both direct and open marketplace trades to flow harmoniously through the supply chain. The solution that I'll talk about today is one that requires the whole industry to understand and to participate in. And unlike other initiatives, this is the first time that an industry consortium network has been proposed in any global market. So all eyes really are on the UK at the moment. In this diagram, you need to imagine that nodes as data connectors. And to get it out of the way early, there's no need to disband or alter your tech operations in any way. This to us is a smart solution. It's in securely sharing and harmonizing campaign data so that everyone works with an immutable single version of the truth. And this is run and governed by the industry, all working together to create a new version of a trusted business network or framework where everyone agrees to a single version of the truth. And TAG, like JICWEBS, are a non-for-profit organization acting in the best interests of self-regulation in our industry. And part of our remit is to look at other ways for the industry to work. And to us, this approach looks to be a really smart way forward. Could I have the next slide, please, Bonnie? So what we've seen with other solutions are applications created offering great insights, but without building the infrastructure. So effectively the energy grid with energy provider without the grid. We have a DLT platform, one that's been evaluated and is ready to move into the beta phase. It's been built with our specific industry requirements taken into account, and on perhaps the securest and most advanced protocol layer, R3 Corda, which happens to be owned and operated already by a consortium of financial institutions, using it for their highly secure trades and transactions. So let's run through the key elements of what an industry consortium network could look like. But remember that there is a lot more detail outlined in the consultation documents that you'll get access to after this webinar. The solution on offer is for the industry to help create a permissioned collaborative consortium network, something run for the industry by the industry, and using a distributed ledger technology platform that requires a set of minimum requirements for companies to participate. These minimum requirements are defined by the network governance body and placed in a master service agreement that every participant signs up to and to become a trusted business partner. Part of this agreement would be to feed a set of campaign impression logs into the network in given time intervals, contributing to the shared data. Now, the shared data is secured over end-to-end encryption and remains private by providing the owners of that data full control as to who gets access to it and how it gets used through the use of encrypted keys. And the data received from all participants allows the network to create a private, secure, immutable, near real-time audit trail for every campaign impression that runs across the network, because it's written into the distributed ledger, which makes sure that what you see is what I see, and provides what can then be defined in the network as everyone's shared truth. Now, because this is now an automated process run across an industry consortium network, it can then be used in a number of ways to drive accountability and address the industry trust and transparency issues, as well as also deliver a range of business benefits at minimal cost. So the network is proposed to be used for live reconciliation, so an API providing everyone participating near real-time access to reconciled impression data, right the way across the supply chain. Through smart contracts, which we hope to also introduce, it's a way to automate the reconciliation of impression data and validate a booking that has certain business requirements amongst all the parties involved in that contract. And then finally, live compliance, where compliance to standards can be properly monitored in real time, with the potential for a live compliance certificate, providing information on the compliance of all participants within the network. And just finally, back to those applications that I mentioned right at the start, the industry have one integration to do with this solution, and then through an open API, all other applications and third parties developing the value-added solutions can become part of the network application ecosystem, very simply. Next slide, please, Bonnie. So we outlined the benefits in more detail in the materials provided after this call. And the pilot study was able to prove out a lot of these, but here are some outlined and who they would apply to. So reducing business risk, having who are easier to trade with because of being part of the network, so no reconciliation work required, etc. with these partners would be a benefit to a lot of those involved. A real-time immutable data picture could help quicker decisions and reduce fraud and poor practice. And live compliance could then mean that buyers could see in real time who was compliant and to what standards. With increased value and increased revenue, imagine the buy side making smarter and quicker decisions in near real time, and the sell side having greater visibility upstream to get more of the campaigns that they really want, all based on a near real-time single version of campaign data. Reduced costs could be for everyone when a lot less time is spent reconciling data and more time on proper analytics. And with smart contracts, also simplifying the process and streamlining admin and legal requirements, there could be huge benefits for agencies. And the final one, reducing capital, working capital. So with true near real-time picture of campaign data, there should be no disputes over what has been bought and sold. And so there's a real opportunity for there to be a reduction in payment cycles as a result of this. Can I have the next slide, please, Bonnie? So I just want to talk about the pilot itself. So the pilot ran over a duration of 9 months and is actually still running until the end of the year. It's the largest and most expensive pilot of its kind, and it has the involvement of agencies from all the holding groups and some major brands. The focus of the pilot was on the validation and reconciliation on qualitative and quantitative metrics, and less focused on the financial values of those transactions. So with the pilot, what we wanted to look at were 3 key areas: supply chain transparency, supply chain optimization, and the operational efficiencies to come from DLT. If we look at supply chain transparency, taking each brand separately, we were able to validate that the adoption of a DLT platform would significantly help by adding this unified data and reporting layer. And we were also able to successfully map the supply chain for each, identifying the participants and onboarding these participants and their data into the platform. And then impression feeds were then harmonized to a common format for later use. And with supply chain optimization, we used the harmonized data to validate the execution of campaigns against what a brand considered their agreed set of metrics. And then we reconciled these amongst multiple integrated vendors. So what do I mean by that? We called these qualified impressions. And this was where we took what brands considered their most important criteria, such as matched using a common record ID, had no timestamp discrepancy, whether it was measured for viewability, or whether it was determined brand safe or fraud-free. And finally, whether the creative rendered successfully. We took all those, and then this impression was considered as a qualified impression. And then the last thing was to look at operational efficiencies through the pilot. And this is where we analyzed how smart contracts could automate business processes between ad buyers and sellers. And we conducted some detailed research into just to understand how much time is spent by programmatic practitioners within agencies and how long it took them to carry out their normal tasks. So can I have the next slide, please, Bonnie? The key takeaways were really interesting. 34% of media, based on the qualified impression criteria implemented in this study, could be spent more efficiently. And 80% of media was found to be qualified. But when you overlay that as to whether viewable by IAB standards, this resulted in 66% of media being qualified. 4% could have been spent more efficiently. And then across all domains analysed in the study, 20% delivered a qualification rate of less than 40%. But in contrast, 45% of domains delivered a rate of 90% and above. So when it came to operational efficiencies, 60% of the time spent by a programmatic practitioner was extracting, manipulating, and reconciling data and performing general admin tasks, whereas only 20% of their time was spent on analysis and other constructive duties. There seemed to be an imbalance here, which was further validated by 59% of respondents stating that campaign reporting and reconciliation would really benefit from automation. So just to summarize, and remember that we have the full and executive pilot reports available after this call. More harmonized visible data can lead to freeing up more valuable resources, better optimization of campaigns throughout the supply chain, and in doing so, unlocking more spend for the domains delivering greater qualification rates, which I would imagine should be really good news for premium publishers. Could I have the next slide, please, Bonnie? So if we look at the reactions from the pilot participants, this has been really encouraging, as you can see. Nigel Vaz, from IPA president and CEO of Publicis Sapient, said, while the internet made information accessible to everyone, we hope blockchain as a technology, and specifically DLT, as used in this pilot, will start to create accountability for the transactional aspects of the internet. We had Steve Pollock, head of media communications from Nestle, saying, the JICWEBS DLT pilot is an important initiative in understanding how DLT can be a solution to many of the challenges that our market faces. From Simon Reap from J&J was excited to be supporting the potentially groundbreaking JICWEBS DLT Pilot. Only together as a cross-industry consortium can we truly solve this problem, and it's great to see so many partners willing to take part. Mia from OMG Programmatic team said the JICWEBS DLT Pilot is one key initiative in the UK that is helping to solve many of the challenges that programmatic faces. Oreo from Adform, we believe the JICWEBS DLT initiative will help the industry to improve transparency and trust, tackling the challenge with an innovative approach that will definitely result in new solutions. And finally, Bal from NetMums said this is why we see this initiative as not only important for us, but crucial for the success of the entire ecosystem. Next slide, please, Bonnie. So today officially launches the consultation process, which also releases access to a host of other materials that are around this pilot. And I'll show you later in the presentation how you can gain access to that. So you've got 5 weeks to make your submissions by the 5th of November. Between now and then, there'll be some follow-up trade association webinars. IAB have got one planned for the 7th of October, and the IPA are hoping to get a date in the diary week commencing the 12th of October. But if you have any specific questions after reading the documentation and other materials that come as part of the process and would like a one-to-one conversation or meeting, then please don't hesitate to get in touch with your trades and we will get something sorted. So bear in mind, all submissions should express the views of your company and they are public. So in terms of what will happen next after the submissions, I'll be chairing a steering committee, which consists of all the trades. IAB Tech Lab will be in place for the IAB, as well as the senior management team from TAG. And the purpose of the steering committee is for the trades to help consolidate the industry's responses from their members and form some sense of what their recommendation would be to TAG. And then before the end of the year, TAG will then make a final decision about the next steps of this project. Next slide, please, Bonnie. So I'm just reaching the end. So ever since the trade bodies gave the green light to this initiative, we've been consulting with the industry as to how this would. And this was just the start, though, and this vision, as Jules mentioned earlier, is not going to work unless the industry buys into it. Before thinking that we have all the answers figured out, we will be going through a 6-month beta or MVE phase, which during this time, there'll be a lot of further discussion with the industry, but mainly around the following key areas. The first is the value design. So this is the process of designing what the network will deliver to make sure it provides value to all the members who participate in it. The pilot's already identified the value that it provides and the benefits trusted business partners across the supply chain could derive from it. However, we expect to need to refine what the value design will look like further using the input from the consultation process and what we learn from the MVE phase as well. So just to ensure that if and when we go live, we will be fully market ready. The second part is this network design, and this is the process of defining the network governance and operating principles that sit within the network. We're well underway in defining how we think they would look and structured and managed, but the principles themselves and the minimum requirements to join the network will need to be further thought through. And once again, feedback from this consultation process will really help us in defining what these look like properly. And the final one is the business design. And we haven't talked much about this, but the business design is about defining the business model. And I'm sure that's of interest to most of the people on this call. So while the network usage cost should not exceed 1% of the advertising spend running through the network, it's not yet been agreed how this will be broken down. It needs to be fair with charges proportionate to the benefits each participant would receive and the costs they would incur. So this is not a particular focus of the consultation process as such, just so you know, but it is expected to get discussed, agreed and finalised by the industry during the MVE phase. So just to reiterate, the MVE phase offers the industry the process and the time to get these areas right. So nothing will launch without proper consultation and agreement. If it all goes to plan, though, the proposed launch, as Jules mentioned, would be later next year. Bonnie, could I have the next slide, please? So we'd like your input. We'd like to get your input, and you have until November the 5th to do this. Just another reminder, your views are really important to the steering committee. So please do commit to the time to review this proposal, the documentation on offer. And if you're not the person within your company to provide this feedback, please do flag this up to whoever it might be. These are tough times, and change might be the last thing on your company's minds at the moment. But this is a one-off opportunity to lead the way for the industry to collaborate and build something really powerful in the UK. So next slide, please, Bonnie. So this is the URL that I'd like you all to take down. This is the URL that will take you through to the consultation page on the TAG website. I know it's quite long-winded, so I'll give you a bit of time. We'll go back to it, Bonnie. But yes, if you could click through to the link, and if we can scroll down, I can talk through the process. There we are. Okay, great. So the first is the TAG DLT Network Consultation document. This is a 50-page document. It goes into all the details that I hope that you'll need in the process. And it's accessible to you via this link. So please go there and first and foremost, pick that up and have a good read about that. We also have on the same page, the DLT executive summary and the full pilot report for you to access. There is a technology document for those that want to dig more deeply into the technology that we've talked about. And this can be requested through a signed NDA on consultation@tag.net. There are also some really useful videos. There's one of Jules, Nigel Vaz, and Tim Brown talking at the London Tech Week. And if you scroll down a little bit more, Bonnie, I can just highlight the fact that we have webinar videos from Jules, from Gavin Stirrup, Richard Brown, Igor, and Phil Heyman about a lot of the various different aspects of the pilot and the project. So the way to make your submission is to email consultation@tag.net in a document format like a PDF or a Word document. And there's just some notes here as well as to if you're responding on behalf of an organization or in a personal capacity. But have a read of those. They're all there. We'll follow up with both a link to this video, which I hope you found really